I froze the moment I saw her. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move and couldn't even believe what my eyes were showing me. There she was, standing behind the counter of a small roadside restaurant, carrying a tray filled with coffee cups and plates. My daughter-in-law, 7 months pregnant. Working as a waitress, I stared at her through the restaurant window, hoping desperately that I had somehow made a mistake. Maybe it was another woman who looked like her. Maybe the exhaustion in her face was just my imagination. But then she turned, our eyes met. The color drained from her face. The tray in her hands trembled, and I knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. Her name was Emily. She had been married to my son, Daniel, for almost 3 years. From the day she entered our family, I had loved her like a daughter. She was gentle, respectful, hardworking, and always tried to make everyone around her happy. When she became pregnant, I was overjoyed. It was going to be our first grandchild. I had already started buying tiny clothes, blankets, toys, and even a little wooden crib. But there was one problem. Daniel had suddenly changed. My son had always been ambitious, but after getting promoted at work, he became obsessed with money and status. He began spending less time at home and more time with people who constantly reminded him how successful he was supposed to become. Then one evening, Emily called me. Her voice sounded strange. She said she and Daniel were doing fine, but I could hear something behind her words, fear. I asked her if she needed anything. She said no. I asked if Daniel was treating her well. There was a long silence, then she whispered, "He's just under a lot of pressure." I wanted to ask more, but she changed the subject. A few weeks later, Daniel stopped answering my calls. When I finally reached him, he told me everything was fine. Mom, Emily is taking care of herself. Don't worry, I believed him. That was my mistake now. Months later, I was standing inside a restaurant, watching my heavily pregnant daughter-in-law work for tips. I walked through the door. Emily immediately lowered her eyes. Mom. Her voice broke. I walked toward her. What are you doing here? She looked around nervously. I work here, I can see that. I replied, but why? She swallowed. I needed the money. I felt my heart sink. What money? She didn't answer. I noticed her shoes. They were worn out. Her hands were red from washing dishes. There were dark circles beneath her eyes. She looked exhausted. Where is Daniel? I asked. Emily looked away. He doesn't know I'm working. I stared at her. Why? She whispered, because he told me not to. My stomach tightened. Then why are you doing this? She looked directly into my eyes. Because your son stopped giving me money. I couldn't speak. Emily continued quietly. He said the baby was my responsibility. I felt anger rising inside me. That's impossible, he said. I wasn't contributing enough to the household. Then he stopped paying the bills. I looked at her stomach. Emily, you're 7 months pregnant. I know you shouldn't be standing all day. I know. Then why didn't you call me? Tears filled her eyes because I was ashamed. That sentence broke something inside me. You're my daughter, I said. You never have to be ashamed of asking me for help. She wiped her tears. I didn't want you to think I married your son for money. I stepped closer. You could never make me think that. Then she said something that completely changed everything. Mom, Daniel didn't just stop giving me money. I waited. He took the money you gave me. I froze. What? Emily reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. Inside were bank statements. My name was on several transfers. I had been sending money every month to help Daniel and Emily prepare for the baby. But the money had never reached Emily. Daniel had been taking it. I looked at the statements again and again. Thousands of dollars gone. I felt betrayed not only by my son, but by the fact that Emily had been suffering while I believed everything was fine. Why didn't you tell me? Because he threatened me. My blood ran cold. What did he threaten you with? She hesitated. He said, if I told you, he would leave me. I looked at her stomach. And you were afraid he'd leave you alone with the baby? She nodded. I thought I could fix everything myself. I took her hands. You don't have to fix this alone anymore. That evening I drove Emily home. Daniel wasn't there. The apartment was nearly empty. There was no food in the refrigerator. The electricity notice was lying on the kitchen counter. And in the nursery there was only an unfinished crib. I stood there silently. This was supposed to be the happiest time of my son's life. Instead, his pregnant wife was working long shifts just to buy groceries. I called Daniel. He finally answered. "Mom, I'm busy." "Where are you at work?" "Come home." There was silence. "Why?" "Because we're going to talk." He sighed. "About what?" "About Emily." Another silence. Then he said, "She told you." My heart stopped. "You knew she was working?" "Yes, while 7 months pregnant." "She wanted to." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "She's your wife. I provide enough." "Enough for what? Because she has no food in the refrigerator." He became defensive. "Mom, you don't understand our marriage." "Maybe I don't, but I understand cruelty." He hung up that night. Emily slept in my home for the first time in months. She slept without fear the next morning. I helped her contact a lawyer. We gathered the bank statements, bills, messages, and everything else that proved what had happened. But there was something neither of us knew. Daniel had been hiding an even bigger secret. A week later, the lawyer discovered that he had been transferring money from a joint savings account, money meant for the baby's future. He had spent it on expensive dinners, vacations, and gifts for another woman. Emily was devastated. I was furious. But the truth was finally out. When Daniel realized that we knew everything, he came to my house. He stood at the front door. "Mom, please. I didn't move. Please let me explain." I looked at him. "Explain why your pregnant wife was washing dishes while you spent her money." He lowered his head. "I made mistakes. One mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did was a choice." He started crying. I was under pressure. "So was Emily. I thought I could fix it." "You didn't even try." Then Emily walked into the room. Daniel looked at her. "I'm sorry." She stood quietly. "I waited months for you to say that." He stepped toward her. She stepped back. "I don't hate you, Daniel." His eyes filled with tears. "But I can't trust you anymore." Those words destroyed him. Months passed. Emily gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The first time I held my granddaughter, I cried not only because she was beautiful, but because I knew how close we had come to losing the family we once knew. Emily slowly rebuilt her life. She stopped working at the restaurant. She began studying from home and eventually started her own small online business. She became stronger than she ever imagined. As for Daniel, he had to face the consequences of his choices. He lost his marriage. He lost his comfortable lifestyle. Most importantly, he lost the trust of the people who had loved him most. But eventually, he began therapy and took responsibility for what he had done. It took a long time before Emily allowed him to become part of their daughter's life again. Trust wasn't restored with apologies. It was rebuilt through actions. One evening, months later, I visited Emily. She was sitting on the porch with her little daughter, sleeping peacefully in her arms. She smiled at me. "Do you remember the restaurant?" I smiled sadly. How could I forget? She looked down at her daughter. "That day changed my life." I shook my head. "No. That day didn't change your life." She looked at me. "You changed your own life when you decided you deserved better." She smiled through tears, and I realized something I would never forget. Sometimes people hide their pain because they are afraid of being judged. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one silently carrying the heaviest burden. And sometimes all it takes is one person to notice. One person to ask, "Are you okay?" One person to refuse to walk away. I had gone into that restaurant expecting to have lunch. Instead, I found my daughter-in-law standing behind a counter, 7 months pregnant, exhausted, and frightened. And I discovered a truth that changed our entire family. Family isn't just about sharing a last name. Family is about showing up when someone has nothing left to give. It's about protecting the vulnerable. It's about listening when someone says they're fine, even though their eyes are telling you something completely different. And most importantly, it's about reminding someone that needing help doesn't make them weak. Sometimes it is the first step toward becoming strong. That day I didn't just take Emily home. I helped her find her voice again, and the little girl she gave birth to became a reminder that, even after betrayal, pain, and heartbreak, a new beginning is always possible.